Okay, so here is the Tower of Terror tutorial that I completed a few years back. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the setup and how you work through this. I do have resources available up on Compass. Firstly, it is this sequence of a PowerPoint, and if I just go through it quickly, this is probably the important one. There's the layer stack, and I actually replicated that in the Word document that goes with it. But if you actually play through this, you can skim through the various bits and pieces, and it kind of works. The more important thing is actually the PowerPoint. It outlines every single one of the steps. So here we have the actual structure at the top. The layer structure, as I mentioned, was important. It really gives you where each of the pieces are and should roughly sit in order to go from the background to the foreground in the title at the top. Then some general notes going through what I did at each of these stages, and it goes on for 2 pages, but I'll again share that out with everybody. So getting back into Photoshop. So here's the finished version. As you can see here, I've had a bit of a go at it. So we need to set up the new copy. What I've provided, or what I'm using here, is the resources that, again, I said you get a copy of them. And all this stuff is basically composited together, layer upon layer, to create the final image. So I'm just, oh no, not open, try new. All right, yep, new. So in this case, I'm just going to switch it over to centimeters, and I'm looking for a 24 by 28, so yeah, height 28, width 24. The resolution will be 300 because it's for print. I'll leave it as RGB because it's easier to work with. And we just go, yes, done. We have a starting point. Now, with these different images, we should start with the background image. Yep, the background.psd. I'm not sure why it's a PSD, but that's okay. And I'm just grabbing the corners to resize it so it fits into this space, and it's automatically labeled. Tick OK, and that is done. Don't know if I want the wings yet. Is that in the original? Yes, it is. All right, it stays then. Now, this is perfectly fine, but we want to add an effects layer over the top of it. So here we just go to blending options. So you right click on the actual image. If you depending on where you right click, you'll get different responses. There's a third one over here if you've got image masks or locked stuff. But actually on the icon, blending options. Inside blending options, we're going to look at the color overlay. Here it's already defaulted, so I'll just go through the process again. We want to change the blend mode to multiply. We want to drop the opacity to 23%. And you can grab the slider, slide it back and forth, or put in the numbers, either or. Now, in the color picker, which you just click on to access, we want to change the RGB to 134, 100. I'm just hitting tab to move between these different fields, and 7. This gives a fairly disgusting looking brown color. That's okay, we hit OK, and what it's done is actually tinted the layer just subtly with that color, and you can see that here. Alright, I'm now trying to add the bloody sky. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the gradient tool. I'm going to have a transition from a red, so I've just grabbed the red in the top corner here. Although if I've got artistic choice, I might make a darker, bloodier red, or whatever I feel is appropriate. And then with the actual gradient tool, and this is my toolbar for that tool, I want to change it from black foreground to background color. I want to change it from foreground to transparent, which is the second option here. And there's a bunch of different options depending on what you want to do, but this is the one we want. Then I also need a new layer. So I won't need this to be a standard transition. For some reason I've got the circle one here for something else I was doing. And that's pretty much it. Then I need to actually look at where I'm going to position it, because if I do it straight here, I'm just going to add it to this layer here. I need a fresh layer with which to do it on. And so I'm going to call this Bloody Sky. And all I do is drag from the top to about the center. If I want a very straight line, I can hold down shift, so that way it actually does the 45-degree angles if I want, and release it, and there's my bloody sky. If I don't like the particular tone, I can actually drop the opacity and make it less stark or less bright. So that's probably what I want to do in this case. Next up, I want to add a shadow gradient to the earth. So in this case, I actually want to shove the color picker to 000 or black, as you can see there. Keep it going transparent, add a fresh layer, and this is the shadowed earth. Now you'll notice I'm going in and naming everything, so I know what it's all about. Here I'll just put in that, and that sort of puts in something a little darker down the bottom. Now my notes, I say go halfway. That kind of works, kind of doesn't, but we'll leave it as. We can always adjust it later on. Now in that whole stack, the shadowy earth goes underneath the sky layer. Then I bring in these two hill layers. So I'm going to leave that sitting where it is, so they'll add in the in-between gap there. A left hill, which I will resize, but I'm going to resize holding down shift to keep the consistent aspect ratio, so it doesn't get too distorted. Somewhere around that, I think. That's roughly okay. Tick okay, and then the other hill, which is going to be the other side. Thank you. So just grab and drag that drop there. So really I'm just trying to fill in this background. So I've got these mountains in the far distance, some hills in the mid-ground, and then I'm going to add the graveyard to the front. And click OK on that one. Now I actually need to rasterize both these layers because they're Photoshop files. It's going to assume, click over here, that it is a smart layer, and you can do weird stuff with smart layers, but we won't get into that yet. But if we rasterize this, makes it just a flat image that we can then go through and do stuff to. And the stuff we're going to do is going to add a blending option. I'm just going to do it to the right hill, and then I'll copy it over to the left. So adding a blending option here will be a color gradient or color overlay. I'm going to change this color. Now I know it's say 72, 54 and 6. So it's a slightly darker color. And the opacity is a little higher at 59, but it's still a multiply set. And you'll notice here, it remembers what you did last time. So just always be an idea to check this stuff. So that darkens up that hill to sort of match the tonal qualities of what's going on. And quite simply, if I right click on the text, I can then go copy layer style, go down to the next one, paste layer style. And that then darkens up the hill so it matches all this stuff. Just going to hide these stacks a little bit because I don't need to modify these pieces again. And this is the layer stack I've got at the moment. And we'll get back to it in just a sec. Okay. Next up, we need to add the graveyards, so the graveyard. So I'm just going to grab the graveyard PSD and drop it in here. Wait for my computer to catch up with reality, not responding, finally. And it should probably be the topmost layer. I'll adjust that in a second. Again, holding down shift to keep that consistent aspect ratio. That looks pretty good for a graveyard. And go OK, and then move it to the top of the stack so it puts it in front. I know you can barely see the hills at this point, but hey, it's what it is. Need to add again a color overlay to this thing, so blending options, color overlay, but actually adjust the values in it. So it should be 54%. I can get this, as long as it's roughly right, it should be fine. The color, now 51, 24, no 42, sorry, 51, 42 and 5. Gets you an even darker brown, okay. Now you'll notice the effect here is when I rasterize this layer, whoops, wrong spot, click there, rasterize layer, it should, oh, it's been rasterized, great. And then I actually desaturate the image, and there's two ways to deal with this one. Image adjustments. The first one is the desaturate option, which just does that to it. If I undo this step. Alternatively, you can go adjustments, hue saturation, grab the saturation and shove it to -100. It does basically the same thing, as you can see. That's done. Now we need to actually use the filter gallery to get a bit of blurry stuff to it. So filter gallery. All the brushes usually placed in separate locations, but now it's in the filter gallery. So the brush size 2, 8 and 1. Oh gee, it's almost like I've done this before. And click OK. And that just blurs the details on the graveyards just that little bit. Next up is the dodge and burn tools, so dodge, burn. And what we're really doing is applying a bit of a vinaigrette, well, something like that actually, to make the centre of it a little lighter, like that, and the edges, I'm going to switch that back to mid-tones at 50% because it doesn't say adjust them, so I'll go back to the defaults, a little darker, and I'll even work it a little more here to make them a little more ominous. So here I'm just trying to, affect it. And the dodge and burn tools are really good for faking shadows. Alright, that's now done. Okay, so I can't find the appropriate brush and I need to work my way around this problem. I'm going to hide all the background layers so I just get that image. I'm then going to, I want to basically paint it, but if I use my brush, it marks the background as well as the graves, and I don't want to mark the background. So I'm going to select up here, that selects basically everything that isn't the graveyards, reverse this selection, and then grab my brush so that I can only edit. I've also increased the brush size to 300 because I'm feeling lazy. And what I'm doing is just hitting the tops of these gravestones just to sort of scunge them up a bit. If I drop it down a little, bit, I can get into these sort of little gaps and that sort of stuff. And this is where, mucking around with Photoshop can become an interesting challenge. So that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that one. Then the next step is basically to duplicate this layer. Why am I here, you ask? Actually, I'll just I'll Control D to deselect everything so I'll get a full duplication. Duplicate layer. So what it's doing is I'm going to switch this into overlay mode and drop the opacity down to 25%. So what you'll notice is it's just darkened everything up. You can see a slight shift in what's going on there. And that, of course, then adds to the atmosphere. And that, alright, I'm back from an extended break and a little bit of internet research. It's amazing what you can find out there on the interwebs when you actually bother to look for stuff. In this case, it's the brushes I was talking about. So in the first instance, the watercolor brush that was used to shade the top of the gravestones. The second one will be for the house layer that we'll be doing in just a moment. So if we actually go up to the brushes thing here, this little icon, we've got a little cog here and we've got all these additional features. I'm not going to worry about all the features, you can look this up yourself. But if we enable the legacy brushes, what that gives us is a bucket load of extra features. So, legacy brushes too, it's added it twice, perfect. This is a bigger mess now. So if I go back to the top of my list, turn that off, so I've added it twice for some bizarre reason, but it's because I've done it twice, one in testing, one here. So what they've done is they've reduced the Photoshop brush set down to these top couple to here, which is this Kyle's special splatter brush. The legacy brushes are still built in there, and that gives us all the old default brushes, and they're the only ones I'm going to worry about in this case. Okay, cool. And if we go down, we can find a watercolor brush. There's actually a couple of them. So we've got round watercolor, blah blah blah, and just pick one and shade with it. Make sure you just select the layer of the gravestones and not shade above it. For this one coming up with the house, I'm actually just going to pre-select the large oil pastel, which is somewhere in this list. Oil pastel large. As you can see, there's some really wonderful ones scattered through here, and I'll select that and save that for a little later. So yep, done. So you can see my little icon there. Anyhow, I've got to bring in this house layer. So going back to my house, drop in the house there. It thinks about it for a sec. Yep. Hangs, not responding, and there's my house. So I need to just basically set it up where I want it. So I'm going to drop it into the background here behind the gravestone somewhere. And I've rounded the controls on the free transform tool. You've got this, which is resize, but in any direction. You hold down shift, it does it. Keeps the aspect ratio. You hold down alt, it does it around a center point. Hold shift alt, it does that. And here is you got some distort going on. Control Z to undo. So that's the basics. Then you got the rotate tool. It's all built into one. There might even be a skew in here somewhere. No, that's rotate still. All right. But under the edit menu, we have a whole bunch of additional things you can actually focus in on the bit you want. In this case, I really just want to distort the house. So I'm just going to get it and make it look a little more loomy. And position it about here so it sits in the background. Ticking OK, I've done with that. I will leave it on this top layer, but I'm going to actually drop it down a little bit lower. And I should probably reorder these things because the house should actually sit there and the bloody sky should be near the top. So the house, first up I need to actually add some brush strokes to it. So back to our filter gallery. Dry brush? No, it's angled brush. Do we even have an angled brush? Brush strokes, angled brush. Accent angled. Alright, and the angles that it gives me in the tutorials are 32 tab, 11 tab to the next field, and 3. Alright, hitting OK, and we can actually look at that and you can see how it's shaped. I can actually change the direction, so you can go, yeah, I want it like that. And the great thing about this is that the numbers, you might feel they're preset, but you can really just pick and choose what you think is appropriate. So click OK on that one. The house is now being a little bit dry brushed. And I want to take that layer style from the graveyard thing that I've done. So I'm just going to copy layer style, go back down to my house and paste that layer style so it ends up as that shadowy thing in the background. Now, as I mentioned, we need to pick out our brush tool, and this is where we use the oil brush. I've already got that enabled. Oh, I'll have to rasterize this layer before I can start brushing away at it. Rasterize layer, yep, there it is. And we've got to have some presets for this particular brush. So first off is setting the color. Using the picker down here. Here it's 50, 40, 23. So 50 for the red, 40 for the green, and 23 for the blue. And 20% opacity, so back up here to the controls for this brush. 20%, it's probably a regular brush actually. Do I just make a note of what it was? No, so it'll be a regular brush. And then I should be, I'm just shading over the entire bloody layer. I just want to affect the actual thing itself. So I will quickly use the selection tool, in this case the quick select tool, to select what looks like the house, or actually just Control D, deselect, select it, use the matching one, select everything else, select, invert, then we go back to our little brushy brush and make it a little, it's almost incomprehensible. Oh, the house is an overlay. Let's just not do that. Yeah, you just shadow it up with this pastel brush. Make it look like something else, and it should really just be a normal layer, not a dissolve, normal. Alrighty, and that covers most of that. The next step is actually to apply the dodge tool, so looking for dodge. Dodge, this should lighten it up. Brush size 300, not 1800s. Drop that down to a 300. Oh, whoops. Fat fingers on keyboards and stuff. And then we should be able to, I'll just lighten up the top of it so it gets that sort of something hitting the top. And that covers this section. After even a slightly longer break this time, back to adding some more features to this thing. So what I'm going to do is delve into the cross. I'll just drop the cross in somewhere here. Yeah, that'll do. I'll move it over there. Oops, hold down Shift to keep the scaling right, or Control Z to undo the mistake and then adjust. So we'll just, it's skew if, or was it in the foreground? Wait, check the original. Ah, it's in the foreground, cool. Oh, it disappeared. Okay, do it again. La da 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 da. Alright. Hopefully this will work. It thinks about it. Yep. Make it a little bigger and just whack it off kilter. That's pretty good. And then shove it to the top of the stack. Now I need to move this, so use the move icon just to. Alright. Then, oh, actually the earth layer should be up high as well. Yeah, that's better. Alright, so what was I going to do to this one? Again, dry brush strokes, so the filter gallery, make sure I've selected the right layer. Filter gallery, artistic brush strokes, artistic, dry brush. And looks like the same level of detail as I had before, which is 2, 8 and 1. But we need to be careful of the colour, so we'll do that in just a second. So that's now reverted into dry brush strokes, which sort of gets consistent. And then add a layer style, so blending options. This will be a colour overlay, I guess. Mode will be multiply. Opacity will be at 30%, and the colour picker goes for, again, a fairly muddy colour. Now you can sort of, with these ones, you can go use the sidebar and go guess and refine, guess and that sort of stuff. But since the values are given, might as well just do it this way. Click OK, that's the colour done, that's the mixing. And then we add a duplicate of this, but with, so we duplicate that layer. Okay, but we make this layer a 25% overlay, so, oops, not 35, 25. Overlay. And you can see the same technique is being pulled out again and again for this thing to build up these layers to create that sort of consistent effect. So if we ditch the overlay, it sort of changes the color hue of it just that little bit, and it's just a semi-see-through layer over the top. Now we need to add something to the very top layer, which is the text. And I forgot to check what font they used, so random font selection time. And I'll have fonts here that you don't have, like the C64 Pro for the good old Commodore 64. But we need something big, chunky, that sort of creates that, we can transform into that drippy kind of blood-stained fontiness. Show card Gothic, that's close enough. May even be the right font. What is it? House of Horror, Hand of Horror. Oops, Hand of Hodor. Alright, so select all, Control A to select all, make sure it is centered, make sure that it is in a blood dripping colour. That's perfect. And the font size, well here it suggests 80. I suggest whatever you kind of need to do what you want to do with it. It's centered, it's red, tick OK, use a little move arrows to center it on the page. That looks pretty good. We need to then rasterize this layer because it's currently recorded as a vector graphic font, so it's now rasterized as a layer of pixels, and to distort it somewhat. So back to our good old filter gallery full of things. No? Distort. We want glass. Do we have glass here? No, we don't. Why isn't it this? It should just go, oh, whoops, I'm clicking the wrong one. Full. Distort glass. So I'm going to do Control minus at this point so I can zoom out a little bit and have a look at this font in its entirety. The distortion it suggests should be all the way up to 12. So a fairly high number there. The smoothness should be a 4, which again is a reasonable number. The texture should be frosted glass. Great. And the scaling should be about 64%. So let's see how that looks. I can't see any changes whatsoever. I now can make the assumption that this is going to work, or I can push for the extreme values and see what they do. Nothing. So I'm just going to assume this works. I don't think there's been any changes visually, but you know, maybe it doesn't do anything. And then we get into everybody's favorite, the liquify tool. Yes, liquify. So here we're looking at a 40 pixel brush size, yeah, about that, and make it drippy. So here I'm just using the forward warp tool. I could even, some of these might be useful. The bloat tool. Not having much of an effect. Alright, so we'll just resize the brush. This should work. And all I'm doing is really just trying to create this drippy effect. of blood running off the text. And trying to keep a consistent angle, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't look great, but you know, you're the artists, I am not. So here I'm just sort of, again, I'll make it even bigger. Just light touches to distort the whole thing. And then, yeah, a bit of drippiness here, there, everywhere. And I may even want to add a little bit of blurring over the top of this. It's not in the tutorial, but hey, we'll see how that goes. Hi, Hand of Horror, great. I'm now going to duplicate this layer. No, not with that side, with that side. You can see what I mean by the placement of the mouse cursor on the there or there to get different menu options. Then let's have a look at what we've got here. A bit of motion blur. Now this is now, oops, not, I'll try that way. Distance, bring that right in. So you can see it over here, try and distort. Maybe, maybe not. But it's always worth exploring with these sort of things to see what you can get in terms of things happening. And there may be a better option just around the corner that the particular tutorial doesn't point out. Alright, so I'll get on to the next section in just a moment. Okay, yeah, I'm trying this again and again and again until I get it right, because, well, hey, I need to. So first up, I'm going to dive into Edit, Free Transform, and Distort. What I want to do is reshape this so it actually looks like a horror film, and I've taken it back too far, so I'm just going to delete that. Okay, and delete this random layer. Alright, delete. Yes, get rid of it. That one I wanted to actually distort. So here, you know, you can get it bulking out at the bottom, so it, you know, sort of retreats into the background, or in the case I'm going for, I'm going to loom it over the top. Hand of Horror, because I know what happens next. Clicking OK, we're going to move into, that looks a little really weird. Let's try distorting that again. We also have a few other ones that we can muck around with. And it may be actually better to go for something like the perspective or the puppet warp. So the puppet warp's actually a kind of nice one, because no, that's not the puppet warp I was thinking of, because it's usually fairly similar to perspective warp. No, okay, well, I'll forget it. Usually with this sort of stuff, cancel. There's a simple way of doing a slightly more complicated free transform. It's the warp tool. So if I wanted it to keep its consistency in terms of sizing and that sort of stuff, then I might, you know, you've got two Bezier corner handles on here to control the distortion. You can grab any of the parts of the thing and twist it round so that you get this sort of thing happening, and I'm just going to go with that because it's there. Now, we need to actually add some extra pizzazz into this so it really pops out of the page at the people who are viewing it. Mine will go to things such as the drop shadow, outer glow, inner glow, and a bit of bevel and embossing. So we'll start with the drop shadow. Now, the coloration and that sort of stuff is not listed. It doesn't even tell me what I'm doing. So the drop shadow on this one, well, I could keep with the khaki green. I mean, it really doesn't matter as long as it's a dark to sort of distort it, but most of this is actually in a sort of those browny tones. So let's move it to a brown. Now, in terms of opacity, I think the default for this is 25%. The distance was 48. The spread was 20 and the size was 38. I'm just double checking the figures on my notes. And that, as you can see here, is that. Now, we can change the angle to get some sort of better effect, but I'm kind of happy with that one. Then we look at the embossing. Clicking on the embossing tab, we'll bevel boss. First off, we're actually going to go for an emboss. So you can see those clean edges now appearing. And the size, it's a smooth type emboss check, and it's 10 and 10 in terms of the size and the soften amount. Then we add in a gradient overlay. that gives you the coloration shifting. Here it's all pure white. Well, we're going to change that. We'll go foreground to background, and I should be able to edit them, but it's going to go this one. So I'm going to turn this off for the moment. Hit OK and choose my two colours. So first off, I want a sort of nice bloody red. That's a mid red that I'll do for my foreground colour, and the background colour, currently white, I'm going to make it a really dark red. Okay, and then we go back into the blending options to pull up the gradient overlay. In this case, we want it to do that, and click off it, and we can then change the angle. So it could be like that, it could be like this. Really just, it comes down to your sort of personal preferences and that sort of stuff. Style, this is the style of, so if I go radial, it's centered, angled, where one side's a smooth transition until it hits that hard line there, and so it forms a circle. Reflected, so it bounces. That's not too bad actually. Or diamond, not so much. So we'll go with reflected. Scaling, all that sort of stuff should be kind of fine. Then we need to start adding in some other bits and pieces. So pulling this back in, hit OK, and that's now formed. Then we need to add in some of the more of the features over the top. Because I've rasterized this, I can't change it to hands of horror, but there's only one hand, so it should be okay. We add a cast list. Now this again is just a standard text tool. I'm going to add it down the bottom, except this case I want it to be white, not that, so push it into the white corner. Now in this case I'm suggesting a copper plate Gothic light. Light, regular sizing, yes. 32 pixels in size, we'll go 32. And we'll just go left to right. So, person 1. All, drop that down to 32. That's a lot better. And then we can go, no, not tabbing, just space it in, blah, 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 blah. And then we've got a bunch of peoples. I know, I'm just kind of phoning this in, but at this stage I've had enough of the project. Person 1. But you can, well, not really, I'm just going through the tutorial. In this case, you want that font in there down the bottom nice and clear. Because it's white and a black background, it should be perfectly viewable. Next off, we need to drop in the, click OK on the text so it's all confirmed. And you can introduce the people's names down there. As to the people, I'm not too fast, your choice. Then we need to add the sky overlay, which we have to resize so it actually matches the sky. Hold down Shift, lock it into one corner, and then distort it up so we've got the lightning strike in the sky. Now, I don't actually have any notes on how this should be done, but I would actually push it into probably a darken. That might have the desired effect. Let's have a look what else we've got. Normal, darken, color burn, linear burn, normal, screen, something that has the desired effect. So let's say I pick difference. No, that's too different. We'll just go darken, but that's too dark. We can then adjust the opacity if it's too dark, too light, so it becomes more of a silhouette. And I'll click OK on that, and that's pretty much done. Finally, I need to add the actual hand for the hand of horror and a bit of misting. So this sky overlay, I'm actually going to drop into behind the bloody sky so you can just see it and it blends in better. All right, the bloody hand. Where is this hand of horror? Hidden in the distance. So the coloration of this hand is completely wrong. And I'm going to have it leaping up the back there. I'm going to shove it behind the graveyard when I need it. So hand of horror, but there's a few things we need to do with this. So we're looking at an image adjustment. So if I go image, adjustment, and I'm looking in this case at the color balance. So here I'm adjusting parts of it. So I'm going to start with the shadows. So my notes on the shadows involve noisy kittens. 14 for the reds, so I'll push the reds more towards the red, so it reads 14. And the blues are minus 16, so that's, no, minus 16. Hopefully that'll come out right. Then we look at the midtones. The midtones are green in 68, so really pushing the green angle, so 68 or thereabouts. And the pushing towards the yellows, 13. So I've got a feeling that the shadows should actually be the other way towards the more blue. Yeah, that looks better. More sinister and sickly, minus 16 about. So that's about that. Highlights, we're looking at greens at 15, yellows at 24. So greens about 15. So popping the greens a little bit more, so it looks a little more sickly. The yellows at 24, so it's got that little yellow hue to it. So you can see that sort of happening there. Looking at that, that's far too bright for our background of what we've got. I mean, maybe if I pop it up a couple of layers, or behind the shadows actually. Compositional wise, that doesn't look right. Let's tuck it behind the cross. No, it's best behind the graveyard, but we need to move it around a little and adjust our composition just to have this giant hand reaching and grabbing one of the gravestones. Let's have this one. So I'll grab that layer and hold down shift and grab this layer and move those two layers. Up here, I turn off auto select. So I've selected these two layers. I'm not going to auto select anything on top, and I can slide the cross over a little bit and then go back to the hand and then move the hand over. So that sort of thing. I do need to adjust the colors on that hand because it's just the wrong coloration for this picture, I feel. And this is, you know, where your own artistic choices come in. So if we look back at those color adjustments as a starting point, we'll start with the shadows. How do we want the darker places going? Yeah, a little more red, a little more green, a little more yellow. But we really want to, actually no, we don't want to do that. We just want to make it darker. So we look at the adjustments in terms of the levels. So here, and I'm just making it brighter. All I want to do is just darken that up. That's looking a bit better, I think. This horror, hand of horror. That's, yeah, I don't want it to fade out like that. So that will do. Okay, back to this thing of adding mist. So I've added a layer up here. Just add in some mist and we're done. Well, probably not so simple. Undo. What we really want to do is just create that feeling of mist into the distance. So really, I'm probably not on the hand. And I can drop this mist layer back a little bit. And find the appropriate places to add in the mist. If you want to, you can even go a lower percentage, just to, probably not 1%. Just so you can add stuff and slather it on, but there's a point where it ends up too much. If it does end up too much, you can always tweak the layer by just doing something like that, or even just pushing it from into an overlay. No, not an overlay, a lighten of some description. But that's pretty much that for this tutorial. Hopefully that all covers it. I've had to do this one in a lot of parts, so hopefully you can all edit together nicely, and we'll leave it at that. Good luck.